The morning sun beat down on the firing range at Marine Corps Base Quantico, with the kind of heat that made mirages dance across the distant targets. 12 young Marines lay prone on the shooting line, their rifles aimed downrange at targets 800 meters away. Small white circles, barely visible to the naked eye, that would determine whether they graduated from sniper school or washed out. Staff Sergeant Dylan Cooper stood behind them, arms crossed, clipboard in hand. His uniform was crisp despite the heat, his boots polished to a mirror shine. At 29, he was one of the youngest sniper instructors the Corps had ever produced, top of his class in 2019, competition shooter. By the book. He wore his accomplishments like armor. "Time remaining? 5 minutes," he announced, his voice carrying across the range. "This is your final qualification. 7 out of 10 hits to pass. Anything less, you're done." One by one, the students took their shots. The range fell into a rhythm. The sharp crack of rifles, the pause, the radio call from the target pit. Lane 1, miss. Lane 3, hit, outer ring. Lane 7, miss. Cooper's jaw tightened with each report. He'd trained these students for 6 weeks, taught them everything he knew: wind reading, bullet drop compensation, breathing control, everything by the manual, and they were failing. By the end of the course of fire, 11 of the 12 students had failed to achieve the minimum passing score. Most scored 5s and 6s. One scored a 4. Only one student, Private First Class Ryan Castellano, scored a 9 out of 10. Cooper approached the line, his disappointment evident. "Unacceptable," he said, addressing the failed students. "This is the worst performance I've seen in 3 years of instruction." One student passed. One. "The rest of you, I don't know what to say." The students sat in silence, some staring at the ground, others at their rifles. The weight of failure hung heavy. One student, Private Lucas Grant, broke the silence. He'd scored a 6. Close, but not close enough. "Easy for Castellano," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Family's probably military, probably grew up shooting." Ryan, sitting slightly apart from the others, said nothing. He kept his eyes on his rifle, cleaning the bolt with methodical precision. Cooper turned his attention to the group. "You want to know why you failed? Because this generation is soft. 50 years ago, every single one of you would have passed this exam without breaking a sweat. Standards haven't changed. You have." Grant shifted uncomfortably, then spoke again. "With respect, Sergeant, standards were probably easier back then. Different equipment, shorter ranges." Cooper nodded, as if expecting the excuse. "That's exactly the problem. You think—" A voice cut through from the back of the observation area. Calm, measured, with the gravel of age and experience. No, they weren't. Everyone turned. An old man stood alone in the shade of the observation shelter. He was thin, maybe 76 years old, with a shock of white hair beneath a faded Marine Corps veteran cap. He wore a simple gray cardigan over a collared shirt, dark slacks, and worn sneakers. His hands rested at his sides, steady despite his age. Cooper's brow furrowed. Civilians occasionally visited the range, family members of students usually, but this man hadn't been there at the start of the exercise. "Excuse me?" Cooper said, his tone professional but firm. The old man stepped forward into the sunlight. "The standards." They weren't easier. The range was 1,000 meters. No computers, no wind sensors, no rangefinders. We had iron sights and instinct. And it wasn't on a range in Virginia. It was in the jungle, in Vietnam. And the targets shot back. A murmur rippled through the students. Grant exchanged glances with another failed student. Cooper straightened, reasserting his authority. Sir, with all due respect, this is a closed training evolution. If you're here to observe, you need to check in with the range OIC. Ryan Castellano stood abruptly. His face had gone pale. Sergeant, he said quietly. He's with me. Cooper turned. What? Ryan swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. That's my grandfather. Master Sergeant Victor Castellano, United States Marine Corps, retired. The silence that followed was absolute. Grant's eyes went wide. Another student whispered, Wait. Castellano. The Viper? That's a legend. He's not real. Victor Castellano, the Viper, took another step forward. I'm real, he said simply. And so were the 340 men I trained between 1968 and 1972. Cooper's expression shifted. Recognition flickered, followed by something that looked like discomfort. He knew the name. Every sniper instructor knew the name. Victor Viper Castellano was Marine Corps sniper lore, the man who'd trained an entire generation of snipers at Quantico during the height of Vietnam. The man whose students had the highest survival rate of any sniper unit in the war. But that was 50 years ago. This was a different corps, a different war, different standards. Cooper cleared his throat. Master Sergeant Castellano, it's an honor to have you here, sir. But with respect, modern training has evolved. These students have access to technology and equipment you never had. Computer-assisted targeting, ballistic calculators, wind sensors, and despite all that, they still failed. Victor tilted his head slightly, studying Cooper with those pale, clear eyes. Maybe that's the problem. Sir, you taught them to trust machines. Not their eyes, not the wind on their face, not the grass moving downrange. You gave them tools, Sergeant, but you didn't teach them to see. Cooper's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, it's been 50 years since you trained snipers. The battlefield has changed. The Corps has changed. Modern warfare requires... Since I picked up a rifle, Victor finished. Yes, 50 years. A slight smirk crossed Cooper's face, so brief it was almost invisible. And you think you could still pass this qualification? Now? At 76 years old? The question hung in the air. Victor looked at his grandson. Ryan's face was a mixture of pride and concern, silently begging him not to take the bait. Then Victor looked back at Cooper. Yes. The word landed like a hammer. Cooper blinked. Now? Now. Ryan stood quickly. Grandpa, you don't have to prove anything to them. Victor raised a hand gently. I'm not proving anything to them, son. He looked directly at Ryan. I'm proving something to you. Cooper hesitated, caught between protocol and pride. A part of him knew this was a bad idea, but another part, the competitive part, the part that had won trophies and accolades, wanted to see this old man try and fail. All right, Cooper said slowly. Master Sergeant, if you'd like to demonstrate on the same course of fire, you're welcome to. Same standards. 800 meters. 7 out of 10 to pass. Victor nodded once. Where's the rifle? The armorer, a young corporal who'd been watching the exchange with wide eyes, scrambled to retrieve a rifle from the rack. He handed Victor an M40A5, the standard Marine Corps sniper rifle. But Victor shook his head. The old one, he said. You have an M40, original model. I saw it in the rack. The armorer glanced at Cooper, who nodded. The corporal retrieved an older rifle, a Vietnam-era M40 with a basic unertl scope. No modern optics, no parallax adjustment, just glass and crosshairs. Victor took the rifle, feeling its weight. His hands trembled slightly, the inevitable shake of age. Several students noticed. Grant whispered to the man next to him, "He can't even hold it steady." But as Victor brought the rifle to his shoulder, something changed. The tremor stopped. His hands locked into position with the certainty of muscle memory. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind earned through 1,000 repetitions under stress, under fire, under fear. He walked to the firing line, moving slower than the young Marines, but with purpose. He lowered himself into the prone position, the rifle resting on a sandbag. His breathing was controlled, even. Cooper stood behind him, arms still crossed, watching. Victor didn't immediately look through the scope. Instead, he lifted his head slightly and watched the grass downrange. It was swaying, left to right. Gentle but consistent. One of the students whispered, "What's he doing?" Ryan, standing with the others now, spoke softly. "Listening." Victor closed his eyes for a moment, a long, deep breath in, then out. Then he opened them, settled behind the scope, and made a slight adjustment to the windage knob. Just a quarter turn to the right. His finger moved to the trigger. He inhaled, exhaled halfway. Held. The shot cracked across the range. Everyone froze. The radio from the target pit crackled. Lane 1, bullseye, dead center. No one moved. Victor worked the bolt smoothly, chambered another round, and fired again. Lane 1, hit, center mass. Another shot. Hit, inner ring, another. Hit, center. He continued, methodical and unhurried, until he'd fired 10 rounds. When the final radio call came through, Lane 1, perfect score, 10 out of 10. The silence on the firing line was deafening. Victor stood slowly, his knees protesting but his expression unchanged. He safed the rifle, handed it back to the armorer, and simply said, "Thank you." Cooper stood frozen, his face pale. The clipboard hung loose in his hand. Grant stared at the old man, as if seeing a ghost made flesh. Ryan's eyes were shining, but he said nothing. Victor turned to face the group of students. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Your hands shake," he said. "Mine do too. But when you remember why you're holding that rifle, when you remember what it's for, the shake stops. 50 years, and the rifle doesn't forget. Neither do I." Grant opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he managed, "Sir, you didn't use the wind sensor or the rangefinder." "No," Victor said. "I used the grass, the air on my skin, my memory." "You think technology makes you better?" He shook his head. "It makes you dependent. And when the battery dies, when the signal drops, when the equipment fails in the field, what do you have left?" He walked slowly toward Ryan, placed a weathered hand on his grandson's shoulder. "My grandson scored 9 out of 10, Victor said, looking at the other students. "Without my help, without using my name, he earned that score. Not because of me, because of himself." He turned back to the group. "You failed today because you stopped trusting yourselves. You trusted a screen, a number. But in war, when everything breaks, you have to trust this." He tapped his temple. "And this." He tapped his chest, over his heart. Cooper finally found his voice. "Sir, who trained you?" Victor looked at him. "Gunnery Sergeant Tom Hendricks, Quantico, 1967. Cooper's face changed. "Hendricks. He trained my instructor, Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb." A faint smile crossed Victor's face. "Webb, good Marine. I have his name in my book." "Your book?" Victor reached into the inside pocket of his cardigan, and pulled out a small, worn black notebook. The leather cover was cracked with age, the binding soft from decades of handling. He opened it carefully. Inside were names, rows and rows of names, written in neat, precise handwriting, some in green ink, some in red. 340 names, Victor said quietly. Every student I trained. Green means they came home. Red means... He didn't finish. Cooper leaned closer, staring at the page. His eyes scanned the names. Halfway down, he saw it. S.G.T. Marcus Webb in green ink. 89%, Victor said. That's how many survived. Not because of computers, because I taught them to think, to see, to trust themselves. He turned to the last page of the notebook. There in gold ink was a single name. PFC Ryan Castellano. Victor's voice softened. I started using gold ink for family. He's the first one who didn't need my reputation to succeed. That's why I'm proud. Ryan's jaw clenched, fighting emotion. Cooper stared at the notebook, then at Victor, then at the students. For the first time since the exercise began, he looked uncertain. Victor closed the notebook and tucked it back into his pocket. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Cooper. You're a good instructor, Sergeant, he said. But don't let your tools replace your teaching. Machines fail. Men endure. He walked away slowly, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. Ryan watched him go, then turned back to the range. Cooper stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, he looked at the 11 failed students. Remedial training starts tomorrow at 0600, he said quietly. No computers, no sensors, just you, the rifle, and the wind. Dismissed. As the students filed away, Cooper remained, staring downrange at the targets. Grant approached Ryan hesitantly. Your grandfather, he's really the Viper? Ryan nodded. Why didn't you tell anyone? Ryan looked at him. Because I wanted to earn this, not write his name. Grant looked down. I'm sorry for what I said. Ryan nodded once, then walked away. Later, as the sun began to set, Victor sat alone on a bench outside the barracks. Ryan found him there. You didn't have to do that, Grandpa, Ryan said, sitting beside him. Yes, I did, Victor replied. Not for them. For you. So you'd know you didn't pass because of me. You passed because you're ready. Ryan pulled something from beneath his uniform shirt, a set of old dog tags on a faded chain. Victor's dog tags. He'd been wearing them the whole time, hidden. What if I deploy? Ryan asked quietly. What if I see combat? Victor looked at him, those pale blue eyes still sharp despite the years. Then you'll remember today. The test was hard, but war is harder, and you'll be ready. Not because I trained you, because you trained yourself. He stood slowly, joints stiff. Keep the tags, he said. But when you come home, add your own story to them. Victor walked away into the fading light. Ryan sat alone, holding the dog tags, watching the sun set over the range where his grandfather had just reminded an entire generation what it meant to be a Marine sniper. Not the technology, not the equipment. The man behind the rifle. In the weeks that followed, Cooper restructured his entire training program. He brought in Victor twice more as a guest instructor. The pass rate improved. The students learned to see again. And when Ryan Castellano deployed 8 months later, he carried those dog tags into combat. When he returned, he added a single line to them in his own handwriting. Fallujah, 2026. Like you taught me. I came home. Victor Castellano passed away 3 years later at the age of 79. At his funeral, 47 former students attended, men in their 70s and 80s, some in wheelchairs, some with canes. Each one carried a small black notebook. Each one had written Victor's name in their own book, in green ink.